You can see as I'm working my way around the entire surface, I'm really just touching the surface. You really don't need to stab deep down into the core. And it should really start to take shape. Just make sure you keep turning, keep rotating. I mean, mine kind of looks a bit like a swan maybe around the neck. Well, don't worry if it's not the shape that you want it to be at this stage. It's not supposed to be. It's going to transform quite a great deal over the course of the tutorial. Now at this point, I think it's time to attach the legs. For this, you need to take one leg at a time, position where you want the leg to be on the dog. So it should just be, I don't know if you can see there, overlapping with a little bit of a bump for the bottom at the back. And then you just need to gently tack that down, and you can use a lot of the excess wool as a collar. And for now, don't worry about the shape, you're just tacking down. And you can tack it from the front and from the back. And do this for each of the 4 legs. Start to shape them into a triangular kind of shape. And also you want to be looking to have this archway in between. If you're wanting to stab the legs from the inside or the behind or the inside of the legs, if you use your sponge, hold Kevin down and you can stab from the inside with the sponge underneath. But don't do it too much, you don't want Kevin to stick to the sponge. Once you've done a few stabs, turn over and stab from the other side. So hit pause on the tutorial and rejoin when you've attached 4 legs and you've started to embark on some of the shaping. Now we're going to make the ears so that you know exactly how much brown wool you've got left to play with on the rest of the body. For this, you're going to need from my pack 2 parts of an ear template and some sellotape. So to make this template, you want to be making this piece of brown cardboard into a triangle which matches the size of the template underneath. If you bend across the bottom of the triangle, make a bend to go upwards up the triangle and make a bend again. And you should be able to then bend totally back round and close the gap. I'm just going to trim away some of the excess that we don't need, and you'll just need some sellotape just to tack those 2 ends down. And of course your ear template is a lot bigger than it's going to be on the final Kevin, because it will shrink as you're stabbing it. Don't worry if it's not exact, you can see mine's not exact there, it just needs to be a rough triangle. It'll just really help you get the quantity and the size right. If you then take your sponge, take some wool, tease some wool out, mess it up as much as you possibly can into a nice ball of what looks like dog fur or cat fur for anyone who's got cats at home. Push it down into your template and start to stab. Do 20 to 25 stabs, then remove the ball, turn it over and do exactly the same on the other side. You'll need to do 2 of these, 1 for each ear. If you find that one hasn't got quite as much wool in it than the other, then of course add or take away accordingly. The ears need to be roughly the same size. You can also use dress pins if you've got some at home, just to hold the ear down while you shape it a little bit more. Use your felting needle to turn the edges in, and in that way you can decide whether you want your ears to be pointy or rounded. It's totally up to you. And there we go. Don't fully felt them, the same as with the legs. If you leave them in this fluffy, half felted state, then they'll be easier to attach to the head later on, and you can see they're going to shrink a little bit more when they're on the dog, and you'll be able to shape them on Kevin as well later on. Place those to one side. We're now going to make the tail. And the tail is pretty straightforward, just a cute little wagging tail there. And for that, take some wool, same technique again, tease apart. I find it helps to have a cup of just tap water close by for any of these details, and we're going to use the cup of water to make the nose and for the tail. And all you're really doing is dipping your fingers in the water and just, it doesn't need to be saturated, it's literally just damp on the surface, and this will just help those wool fibres start to felt together and bind together. And you can rub this on the surface of your sponge like so, or you can put a little bit of water in your palm of your hand and you can gently, don't press too hard. If you press too hard, it won't roll. You're wanting to gently push the tail shape over the surface. And mine already just looks too big for Kevin. Don't forget, Kevin will shrink a little bit further. So I'm actually just going to take, excuse me, I'm going to take some of that wool away, and I'm just going to pull it and elongate it because I want it to be thinner and longer. And you don't want to fully felt this. It's nice that it's soft and bouncy because that's what a dog's tail is. And don't forget to leave one end of it completely fluffy to allow you to attach it to Kevin's body. I'm going to leave this to one side and finish it off after I've worked on Kevin a little bit more. So now I know I'm left with this amount of wool, and I think you should be left with some wool at the end too. Now is probably the longest section of the tutorial, and it's the longest section that you'll spend at any one stage on making Kevin. And it's the shaping, it's the shrinking and the shaping. And you can see you want it to compact, you want him to harden, you want his edges to be defined, and you want in that cute dog face. He definitely doesn't look Kevin-ish. So I'm just going to give you some pointers for shaping, and we're going to use up the rest of this wool. Start to add extra wool around the surface, particularly if you can see around the leg areas. You want this to be smooth, you don't want to see any join marks. So take small pieces of wool, you really don't need too much at all. Make sure they're fully teased and fully matted and meshed and pulled apart before you lay it onto the surface, and just that'll just blend over any join. I think looking at the head looks quite small, so I think the rest of the wool is probably going to be needed around there. First thing to note is that the neck at the moment, and your neck is probably doing something similar, looks too wide, it's too fat. So absolutely focus some of your stabbing there and get that down to be something a lot narrower. He's quite narrow around his neck. Another point to note is the legs. The legs need to be triangular, so look to have pointy at the bottom legs which come up in a nice straight line up his neck to his head. So if there's any bumps or joins, you want to get rid of those. Pointy legs, a nice arch in the middle of between his front and his back legs for Kevin, up towards the back in more of a curve. I hope you can see that this is more curved. So straight here, curved here. Then you're going to meet the tail straight across the back, so you absolutely want his back to be completely straight, up to his head obviously rounded at the back, which comes forward to, it tapers forward to a point at the front. And as you're working away, don't forget to turn Kevin in lots of directions. Don't forget to stab him on the underside of his belly. Push with your fingers, don't be too scared to push and shape him. And it might take you half an hour or more to get this shape correct. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do my shaping. Now's the time to perhaps pause the tutorial and rejoin after you've got Kevin, your Kevin, to more of a shape that you're happy with. So I'm back. I went off camera just then, and actually I spent almost an hour stabbing my Kevin here, my new Kevin here, and getting him to the shape that I wanted to. So don't underestimate the amount of time it can take, and it's only when it really starts to compact that you'll find that your stabbing makes a difference to the shaping of some of the areas. So just to recap, I've got a nice straight line down here. I've got my points on my legs with an arch semicircle between the front and the back legs, going up to the back, straight across the back there and to my head. And actually the rest of my wool I used on my head because I was finding it was just a bit small, and you might find that too. If you're not sure whether your head is too small or not, it definitely won't be too big, but if you're not sure if it's too small, then just put the rest of the wool over the top of it, tack it down, and you'll know looking at it straight away whether it looks better. The typical things that happen are the neck tends to be too thick and the head tends to be too small. So lots of stabbing on the neck and more wool added to the head. And I've left my head quite bouncy. I've not quite finished shaping it yet, and I thought that we could do that together. I like my Kevin's head to be slightly turning to the front, so not completely straight on. You can see down that line there, it's slightly cocked forward. And how we're going to do that is if you just push manually with your hand, push forward, and as you've pushed forward you just need to then stab that into position. And if you do that enough for 10 minutes, then eventually that neck is fixed in that position of the twisting, and that's kind of, I'd say, characteristic, looking slightly up, slightly forward. Now then, let's attach some ears, and I think once we've got the ears, and possibly we'll make the nose then, once you've got the ears and the nose in position on your Kevin, it's a bit easier to shape him. Once he's got a face, with anything, it's much easier to see what needs to be done. Take the ears that you prepared earlier on and just hold one of them up towards Kevin's head and just tack it in place where you think it'll go. If it's not quite right, we can pull it off and we can reattach it somewhere else. And I'm going to do the same for the other one, and you should just be able to do this yourself by eye. It shouldn't be too hard to work out where they need to go. You don't want them too much on the side, you don't want them too much on the top. So kind of, I'm hoping you can see there, it's kind of diagonally upwards. And the way you just attach them is just, as we've been doing, stroking the surface, prodding the surface. You don't need to stab too deeply. You're not shaping, you're just attaching onto the surface. Do one side, then do the other, and they won't need very much work. The ear, quickly and easily, they become integrated into your Kevin's head, and they may fly out like this, which is what you don't want. And this is where you can put your own creative spin on it, whether you want the ears to be floppy upwards or whether you want them big and bouncy. It's really down to you, and it's going to add character to the dog. And it could even be worth having a picture on your phone or on your computer or out of a book or something like that, having a picture of a Dachshund handy right next to you. Just look it up and see what those ears do. How long are they? What shape are they? You can stab them from the front, you can stab them from the back, and you just, even though you're stabbing it gently and it feels like you're not really doing any felting, actually you are. Any kind of just stabbing on the surface is going to be having some kind of felt effect. He's already looking quite cute. So let's make the nose, and then we'll put the nose in position, in location. Oh, it's so addictive, you can't put it down, can you? Stop. Right. So for the nose, if you take the black wool marked on a little piece of card, black wool, you might not need all of this wool for his nose, so I'd say maybe halve it to start. You can always add a little bit more if it's not quite big enough, and again, this is going to be down to you how big you want that nose to be. And the way we do this is with our cup of water. Dip your fingers in, add a bit of water to the palm of your hand, and just gently start to push the black wool around the palm of your hand. You don't have to be putting lots of force, lots of pressure at this point. Not at the beginning. You're going to work up to being quite forceful with it, and you're going to be making quite a large peppercorn type round shape. It's not going to be super hard. If it's rock hard, his nose, difficult to attach it to the end of his snout. So you do want it to still be a little bit bouncy. It's just starting to take shape. No more water now. I can just keep pushing it round my hands. The wool fibres have soaked up all the moisture, near enough all the moisture that was on my hand a second ago. And I'm hoping you can see I took half the wool there, and already this is looking like a big enough nose. So I didn't need the other half, but you've got it if you want to use it. And it doesn't have to be perfectly round, because you're going to be stabbing it once it's on the end of his snout anyway. It's a little bit bigger than it was on this other Kevin that I've made. Kevin 1 and Kevin 2. Oh, it's quite cute actually. Your Kevin snout. And this is a little bit tricky. I tend to just like to hold it with my fingers and just gently prod at it. Not too forcefully, because if you do slip, you're just going to go straight into your fingers. So to begin with, I am just prodding around the edge, and I'm hoping you can see why you didn't want it too firm now. If it were too firm, your needle wouldn't go in. Another technique, which if you've done my tutorials before, you will know about this, is to use a pin. And the pin you can either have sticking out like this, or you can push the pin all the way in. And you know what? It's going to take you at least 3 to 4 minutes, 200 stabs I'd say. It's quite a lot of stabs to attach these. You don't just have to stab from the top through the black into the brown. Also stab from the side through the brown into the black. So you're kind of attaching it from all directions. Poor Kevin, Kevin number 2 getting totally squashed here. There we go. I think mine's attached to the point now that it's not coming away, which is great. Oh! Fab. Loving him already. And can you see what I mean now? It's so much easier to get his face, his facial expression, to get that right once he's got a nose. And don't forget to do underneath his chin as well. Normally it's completely flat in this area here. So I would just go up and down, hoping you can see what I'm doing there. Up and down, making sure we come to a point at the end of his snout, turning all the time, rotating. There we go. He's looking super doggy now. Just those ears are crazy. If you find that you've got join lines anywhere, not just on his head but on his legs, anywhere, a technique is to just stroke or flick, feather the surface of the wool, and it will just bring all those fibres up, blend them together, and then you can tack back down again, and it'll just help to make sure it looks like his ears were always part of his head. And make use of your foam block too, don't forget. If you want to stab the back side of his ears, you can hold his little head and stab his ears from behind. If you want to make them more rounded or pointy, that's how you would do that. And sometimes it's nice to leave his ears or any aspects of his character, leave it a little bit unfinished. You know, they don't have to look super perfect. Part of the charm is that they're obviously homemade, obviously made by hand. Okay, we're coming towards the end of the tutorial now, so there's just a couple more things to do. Oh gosh, look at his face. A couple more things to do. I think he's better than Kevin number 1. No, what do you think, Kevin number 1? Anyway, what we've got left to do is his eyes and his tail. So hopefully it's pretty straightforward and you can see what you need to do with his tail. And now that I've managed to get his whole body slimmed down and compacted, his tail now looks a little bit big. So I'm just going to use some of that water again and just twizzle in my fingers to get that tail a little bit firmer, a little bit smaller. And just leave the end slightly fluffy. You don't want his tail to be too perfect. Kind of needs to look like it's in movement. What I do is just feather out with my needle. Feather out the ends, make sure that they're as thin and feathery as possible before I attach to Kevin. Same as before, just tack down. And don't forget to tack from underneath as well. Pointing upwards is always a good tail. I like to make eye sockets for my eyes, and the way I do this is to look where my eyes would be and stab repetitively down lots of times in that same area. And already it starts to look like he's actually got eyes. You can use your fingernail too to help make sure the needle stays in that one location. Just be careful not to stab yourself. You have got in my kit 2 little, they're called glass eyes, but they're just made of little bits of plastic. You can use those, and that's what I used on Kevin number 1 over here, which is really cute. An alternative, before I stick these down, I'm just going to show you the alternative. For anyone who's done my workshop before, you'll know how to make eyes out of black wool, using the water to roll up and make peppercorns, and that'll make cute little eyes. If you wanted to, and just use your pins to stick them down, lots of stabbing around that eye to stick down the little black wool peppercorn eyes. And what I've included in this kit are some, as I say, glass/plastic eyes. So you'll need to use the cocktail stick included in your kit just to make a hole, or if you've got a bradawl at home, you can use that. Make yourself a hole, use the cocktail stick a bit like a hammer. It won't want to go in at first, but once it's in, just make that hole bigger, and that should allow you to take each eye, one at a time. I prefer these eyes for this dog, rather than the wool eyes. And if it doesn't go in, like that one's not gone in for me, for whatever reason, just go back to your cocktail stick. As I say, use it like a hammer. Hammer, hammer, hammer. And once it's through, make the hole super big and pop your eye in with a tiny blob of either super glue or craft glue. A good way of doing this is to perhaps have some craft glue, so even some PVA glue, any kind of glue. Just have that to one side, dip your eye rather into a pool of glue that's already on the surface, and then pop your eye in. Use your cocktail stick to hold it down in place just while it dries off, and that'll just stop them from falling out. And then of course his neckerchief. Oh gosh, he's so cute. So I'm finding now that his head can turn as I'm starting to come to the completion. I want his head, and in fact his whole body, to turn a little. So I'm turning it in the direction that I want it, and I can see where I need to stab. Keep playing with my fingers and my needle to get it to the exact direction that I want. And I'm sticking my thumb down in his neck, and I can see that mark that is left behind by my thumb is looking the right kind of a mark, so I'm stabbing over to just make it more pronounced, make an impression of where my thumb has been, because I can see that's carving out some of the body features and the limbs of the dog. You can spend as long or as little amount of time doing this as you like. I like to spend quite a lot of time getting the shape right, but you don't have to do that. It's just hard for Kevin not to look great. And his neck scarf. Rolling the scarf up on the backside, leave a tiny section at the front. Once this is on, you can play around with it, and you should be able to then just use some glue, just some regular craft glue, PVA glue, any glue would do. Super glue actually would probably be alright. Just use some glue. I'm just going to pin it there for now, but just some glue around the inside of his neck scarf, and you could put a dress pin there just while you play around with it, and then when you're happy with it and its location, you can cut the ends off. You don't need those excess ends of fabric. Alternatively, I've included in your kit a bow tie, a dicky bow. What Kevin doesn't want a dicky bow? And same for this. Apply a bit of glue to the reverse side of the dicky bow, and then you can just position it in the right place and use your cocktail stick to hold it in position while the glue goes off and dries. And that concludes the tutorial. This is Kevin number 2, the friend of Kevin number 1.